I'm Aldi Keene, this is Matt Braun. Let me begin by reminding you, what's our issue? We're trying to establish the position of your brand, your company, in the marketplace. Why? Because we're interested in understanding customer behaviors and how to change them. Your fit with customers is really going to determine what you can achieve with those customers or segments of customers. Strong fit, you're going to be able to achieve higher share of spend, more retention, more referrals, even higher margins as compared to lower fit, weaker fit. In this session, we're going to look at how you establish that fit. Two components. One, what are the needs in the marketplace? What are the range of those needs? What are customers looking to try to accomplish with this transaction? And second, quantifying those, basically forming the segments. How large are each of the segments in terms of the demand for those needs? When we say needs, Clayton Christensen says jobs to be done. Others say problems to be solved, benefits that people are looking to achieve. It's the criteria that people are looking at, or businesses, in making decisions. Who do I use? Who's my best fit? So Matt, we're looking at that problem. We're looking at establishing range of needs, and I know you've got a case study that you want to take us through. How did we address the needs in this case study?
Yeah, the first piece that we did, in any kind of research that we conduct, is we first want to better understand what might the needs be out in the market. And so in this particular instance, we started with a series of qualitative interviews, in-depth interviews, with the senior leadership of our client organization. And in conducting those interviews, what we learned were all of the different potential needs that might exist, both historically and how they may have evolved over time to where they think they are today. But as you always say, that sometimes in talking to the senior leadership, that can be a bit myopic, that you really need to expand beyond the internal stakeholder group and really get out into the market and talk to the end consumer.
You have to establish the testable hypotheses they have in their minds, but recognize it could be limited.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then what we did was we went out into the market and we talked to a representative cross-section of both customers and non-customers. And in part, they validated what we heard from that internal team, which was really good to hear. And what we determined was that there were 4 very distinct needs from multiple product providers out in this market. The first need that we identified was that I'm looking for the convenience of doing business with one provider. I want one bill at the end of the month that I have to pay.
You even see that in business to business. In fact, it's a whole theory of distribution. I want to minimize my transaction cost.
Yes, and so we called that the one-stop shopping segment. The second segment that we found was really looking for the best products out in the market, regardless of provider. So if I could get the best high-speed internet product with one provider, and the best television product with another, and maybe the best wireless telephone with a third, that's the direction I want to go in. I'm not concerned about price. I'm willing to pay a premium price for the best product. And I don't place as much value on convenience if I feel like I'm getting a subpar product. So we called this the product features and functionality segment, that was their unique need. The third segment that we looked at in the market were individuals that really were looking to support the local economy, their friends, their family, their neighbors, that are prospectively and in reality were working for our particular client organization. And so they were willing to pay a higher price knowing that they were supporting that local or regional company. They were willing to be a little bit more forgiving when it came to some of the product quality issues that existed.
Matt, we see that in other industries as well. There's a big buy U.S. movement that takes place, and it goes up and down. But you see it in autos, clothing, all kinds of industries. So we found a segment like that, or a potential segment in this industry as well.
Yes, yes. And then the final segment is the one that you almost expect to exist in any market, and that is your price-sensitive segment. the group that is rarely loyal to any one provider, and when that next best deal comes up, they're ready to jump ship. And we saw that in this market. So those were the four market needs that existed for this particular client organization. But as they were adjusting their strategy and they said, we're going to go from being a multiple product provider to a single product provider, we needed to better understand the demand for varying levels of, in this case, product features and functionality. So we continued those interviews in the qualitative phase to better understand how do people buy, or what are they looking for when they're buying a high-speed internet product. And we found three. The first was they buy on speed. These are consumers that are more likely to be streamers of video. They are gamers. They stream audio. And so speed is an important factor for them relative to other consumers out there that may just be using the internet for basic surfing or email purposes.
Got it.
The second demand that was out there, or preference that was out there, was reliability. For this particular group, really anything short of 100% reliability or uptime really hindered their ability to use the product in the way that they wanted. You think about if you're streaming Netflix or Hulu or Amazon, and you get that evil spinning wheel that comes up, the buffering that occurs. Well, for this particular segment, that was an unreliable product. That for the way that they wanted to use it, 100% uptime was really the need, the expectation. And then finally, if you think about a product that is best in class, a fast product, a high bandwidth product, the need for service and support really goes down. I expect the product to work. So as a result, I don't want to be calling customer service to report a technical problem or an outage. So my demand for the level of service is far lower than what we saw with some of the other segments.
Yeah, Matt, in looking at that product functionality segment, I want to step back and say, we're looking at the internet, the high-speed internet product here, but the way you've described that product functionality segment, it's demanding entertainment, and they're using that as a substitute for traditional television, cable television or some sort of digital product. So you can see that substitution taking place, whereas the other type of user, more news-oriented, they're probably still using a traditional cable-like television. It's interesting the interplay of these segments and how you can see them evolving over time.
Yeah.
The rest of the demand for the telecommunication services. Okay.
So that was where we started in really understanding the needs that were in the market. We talked about the qualitative piece, but then as you move into a quantitative phase and you go out to a much larger group of customers, the first thing that you're trying to do is to validate that the segments or the needs that are out there actually exist. And so when we went out and we talked to a larger subset of this customer base and even non-customers, we did in fact validate that those were the four needs for a multiple product provider. And we identified or validated the fact that speed and reliability and service and support played in for the product segment.
Giving them the option to state something else. Is there something we missed? Nothing really came up.
Nothing really came up. So that was good validation for us. Then what we did was we looked at the relative weight that each of those needs or each of those factors played in their decision as to which provider they did business with in the market. We determined that weight to establish these different segments. So obviously the one-stop shopping segment, there was a lot more weight placed on the convenience of doing business with one provider. I mean, not to oversimplify it, but that's ultimately what we were trying to do. Moving beyond the validation piece then, what we were really looking to do was to quantify the size of each of those segments, to identify what's the size of the opportunity or the risk as our client moved from being a multiple product provider to a single product provider. And what we found was that one-stop shopping segment and the product segment tended to make up about 70% of this market, about 35% each. Well, that represents two very different strategies. One-stop shopping as a multiple product provider and a consumer that's focused only really on one of your products. Very different. The other two segments, equally sized, about 15% each, were the support local segment and then the price-sensitive segment.
So if you're following a price-driven strategy, if that's what you're hanging your hat on as a company, you're not going to appeal to a large segment of this market, 15%, and you're going to have to fight for that.
Sure. And you say certainly any of these segments can change over time. That price-sensitive segment is one where you tend to see the big swings. In recessed economic times, that price-sensitive segment tends to grow. What we're seeing now is that as the baby boomer generation is moving closer to retirement and they're shrinking, or their disposable income perhaps is shrinking, or what they would spend on a telecommunication product is shrinking, that price-sensitive segment may increase. Whereas in better economic times, with more disposable income, you may see that segment actually shrink.
So we've got the consumer side of this in this case study. We've got the needs, that have to be addressed by the organizations competing for them, the relative sizes in terms of demand for those needs. In our next module, we're going to look at how are they positioned, how are the competitors positioned with respect to those segments. In this case, just giving a preview, in looking at these segments, did it work? We were able to explain market share to about 2 to 3% within reality. So I'd say it works really well. We'll do that in the next module.